just really quickly to remind our listeners, why should people be considering running workloads locally? Now, so we talked about this a lot in episode number 921 with you, Shirish, and Ish. So if people kind of want to go over all of the detail, kind of like an hour of why you should be considering deploying workloads locally, we'll do that. But just really quickly, in like a minute, if one of you wouldn't mind kind of providing an overview of why we'd want to do that.
Well, that's a great question, John. I think if you think about, from the lens of a customer, if they're on their AI journey already, which most customers are today, unless they've explicitly made the decision not to embark on that Gen AI path, right? But those customers that are on the path firmly, what on-device AI does is it gives them optionality, right? It's become very clear to me that most workloads or most experiments are starting, in the cloud, right? Customers are doing POCs. They don't want constraints when they're doing POCs. And when they start deploying to production, they want to get to value and outcomes and not be constrained by capabilities of models or compute, etc. Right? So those customers that have actually gone through and deployed use cases and started scaling them out to their user base or doing multiple use cases, right? What they're seeing and they're signaling to us is that they're starting to realize that not every inference is equal, right? And they're going to run out of either, depending on their model, their business model or how they've implemented AI, they're either going to have costs that are going to skyrocket, right, as they scale out through their organization. Or if they're doing it on-prem, they're going to run out of compute space, right? We know that the bulk of workloads are going to be inferencing in the next few years, right? Almost, the prediction is 90% of all of AI workloads will be inferencing by the turn of this decade. So I firmly believe that the future of AI is hybrid, right? And workloads will run seamlessly across the cloud, the edge, and the PC fleet, right? So going back to my point about all inferences not being equal, that's a great point for AI leaders to start thinking about what is the right compute engine for the inference that they have at any given time. So it brings me to the concept of quality of tokens, right? And what that really means is the quality of the model needed to get a quality response for a particular task can be vastly different, right? And if I take one scenario of code generation or code assistance, that's a use case that is really prevalent out there, and we hear about it all the time. So take that use case. For that scenario, if you're doing autocomplete, you can probably do it on a smaller model, right? Then why burden a GB300 superchip with that? Why not do that on the PC? And then, if you're doing a full-scale code refactor, then sure, you may need a frontier model, right? So what I think will happen is there will be a lot of intelligence that goes into deciding where workloads will run. But just that, if you extend that thinking alone and play it out, I see AI PCs playing a pretty important role in the future of enterprise AI strategy.
Nice. Okay. And then so it's kind of like concrete examples, just kind of reeling off some off the top of my head. There'd be kind of some situations where, you gave examples there where you just don't need a gigantic model running. So why not run it locally? You could save money. You could save time on bandwidth. There also could be lots of situations where, you're on a factory floor and there isn't any internet connectivity, or there isn't high quality internet connectivity, or where performance in real time just matters so much. You don't want any latency. And so, I don't know, just kind of reeling through some reasons why you might want to have.
And beyond cost, right? Just like you said, if you recall, I introduced the AI PC mnemonic back in episode 877, right? that's still one of my favorite contributions. That's my mic drop moment. Just walk away, Shirish. That your contribution. Um, but jokes aside, right? It's still a great way of recalling the benefits of on-device AI inferencing. So, like you said, there's plenty of use cases where latency is the most important, especially when it involves voice or video for human consumption. Humans can pick up, those lags very quickly, and it creates a poor experience. So doing some of that compute locally makes a ton of sense, right, on the PC, as you take away that 200 millisecond cloud latency. The other thing, of course, privacy of data. This is probably understated and poorly understood today. But to me, even if your data is not completely on the device, right? Like very few of us have data only on the device. A lot of our repositories are inside our firewalls, but they're in the cloud. Even in that scenario, if your LLM or your model is processing locally, your query remains completely private, right? And this is a big deal because if you're using a cloud model, public cloud model, your query is completely indexable by search engines, right? And people can know everything that was asked and everything that was put into the context, input, output, context, everything, right? So think of any sensitive or data that inherently needs to remain private, contractual obligations, right? Contracts, IP, or private sensitive queries to an HR database. There's a few examples. Even though there is a database retrieval request going through the network, the input and the output from the model stays completely private to the user on the box, right? So that's a pretty big deal in my book. And there's a new one that's not in the AI PC mnemonic, but it made this recent AWS issue made me realize that this AI on your box is always available. You're not reliant on the wireless networks or browsers for cloud AI.
Right, right.
So
Yeah.
wherever you are, whatever's going on with the network, you always have access to your AI companions.